Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Observances with Daniel Thompson. I am Daniel Thompson. A little bit about me: I'm an independent journalist. I am the editor, founder, and current general operator of the Uptown Observer, which is a new digital news source in Kenosha, Wisconsin. It is also the only sponsor of this podcast right now. If there are people who would like to sponsor this podcast and keep it free and available to the general public, you can contact me at daniel@theuptownobserver.com. But the Uptown Observer is independent journalism for the people, funded by the people. That means that my news source is completely funded by donations from my supporters, from subscribers who make monthly donations. This makes a huge difference in not only the work that I can do, but also things that I can put back into the community. For instance, just a little plug, the people who have supported me have been part of giving back, I believe, between 8,000 and 9,000 into the Kenosha community. This has gone to Grace Welcome Center, a grieving family, or a family dealing with a difficult financial situation and heartbreaking emotional situation, a local musician, and a number of businesses, as well as Shalom Center. So please consider being a subscriber, because not only does it bring more information to your community, but it brings more resources back into your community. Okay, now that we're done with the more formal parts of it, what am I going to talk about today? There are many things I could talk about. I could recap my 2020, but I feel like I've done that so many times at this point, either through local publications or podcasts or national ones or anything like that, that it's just regurgitating things I've already said. Instead, I want to keep kind of doing what I've been doing and flashing back to other places I've been at different points in my life. And today I want to focus on friends, friends I made along the way. Um, that started off as complete strangers. So, right off the bat, let me just say that anybody who works in the newspaper industry has regulars that come to their office. And I don't mean like the normal average Joe that will stop in your office, get a subscription or pick up a single copy or anything like that. I'm talking about those people that are really, really strange. Like, I'm talking like in any kids movie, how there's always that one old man in that house that for some reason hasn't become like a nuisance abatement house or anything like that, even though there's like overgrown weeds and everything. Like, legitimately, the city council would have probably taken over that property by that point. But that one guy that lives in that house that just like everybody's like, yeah, don't go in his yard, he eats babies. That guy, that's the guy that would come see me periodically. They don't come every day, but I had one guy who would come to see me about rocks. Like legitimately, he had been digging up rocks on his property and he believed that they showed something, some kind of evidence of, I think it was a Native American tribe or something like that, or even it might have been UFOs. I don't know. I really don't remember at this point, but I remember that my general reaction to what he was saying was, "Oh, so you're a little strange." Not in a good or bad way. It's just, when you realize that somebody is not working within the same mental framework that you are, you kind of adjust your expectation for conversation. And that's kind of what I did every time. So this guy would come in and me and him would talk for a little while about what he was doing. And then he would always end it with like, well, I'm not ready, like talk about anything on the record, but uh, when I am, I'll come back. And then he'd keep coming back and then we'd keep talking about things. It would be like every few months. I think he just needed somebody to talk to. And that was fine. Another was So when I was in Indiana, one of my regulars was actually a young man with Down syndrome. And he was a very nice young man, but he was very, very forward. And the first time I met him, I was standing on a street corner in Monticello, and I was heading to talk to somebody at the fire department about something. So I'm on a street corner. The fire department's on the other street corner. So all I gotta do is cross this street. And this kid or this young man came up and was standing next to me. We had never spoken before. And Monticello was a small city. So, I mean, I had seen him, um, but this was my first actual, like, personal encounter with him. And no joke, first thing he says, he turns to me, looks at me, and is like, "Are you gay?" And it's one of those things where somebody says something and it takes you a second to actually register. So all you can muster is like, "What?" And then it registers. I'm like, "No." And then I was like, "Why?" He just went, I don't know. And then, like, he would do stuff like that. But after that, like, we were talking a little bit and he actually like followed me into like the fire department and he would do that sometimes. He would just like see me walking somewhere and he would follow me and talk to me. And then like I'd get to where I was going and he would have to like separate from me or something like that. But there were those kind of people that I would encounter in every city that I lived in. And harmless people, but they're just a little bit different than everybody else. The people that, if they're coming down the street, most people would be like, "Oh, yeah, avoid that guy." I didn't mind them coming into my office. I mean, sometimes, yeah, on a really busy day, it was really frustrating. Um, but again, you know, it was, I think oftentimes these were people that didn't have a lot of people to talk to. And just by virtue of being a business, I had an open door. Um, but I had people like that. Um, but I had a lot of people that became friends. And unfortunately, when it comes to my time in Kimball, a vast majority of those people have died since I left. In fact, I was looking this morning and I counted and 23 of my friends died um, since I left Kimball. People I knew, um, I should say. And Kimball was small, 2,500 again. So when I say people I knew, it's not people that I saw around town. It's people I talked to regularly, at least once a week. Um, and yeah, 23 of them are gone. And I think the first one that happened that really surprised me was the man's name was Rich. I want to say it was Rich Yanaga. Yeah, I want to say it was Rich Takeshi Yanaga. Um, when I first went to Kimball, I knew nobody. My father came with me to unload my stuff into my apartment. And then the next day he got on a plane and went back, and I was alone. And of course, you know, knowing that I'm in kind of a more red Christian area, I decided that in order to meet people, probably the easiest place to go is church, which at this point in my life, that this meeting between me and Rich took place, I was not a fan, to put it in the most mild way. Um, and I don't remember exactly how the conversation started, but I think Rich was there and he offered to take me to lunch. And I was poor. I'm still poor. And so I accepted. And we ended up going to Scottsbluff, which was 40 miles away. And on the way, Rich kind of filled me in on everything with Kimball. See, Rich was I want to say he was Asian. Best way to put it. Um, I don't remember specifically which country of origin he was, but or where his heritage was. But he kind of filled me in on what it was like to kind of be different in Kimball because you look at me and you know that I'm not white. I'm something, but not white. Exactly. So, you know, one of the things he told me was, this is love it or leave it country. And I remember that because it's by the end of my time there, I realized how true those words were. You either came there because you loved that area, you were from that area, and you had some kind of tie to that area, or you just left. There was no reason for you to be there. But anyway, Rich did take me out to lunch, and it was actually a meeting with, I believe, another Christian group that was in Scottsbluff. So there was like a small worship thing, and then there was like prayer, I think. And then we ate and we got to know each other a little bit more. And I actually had dinner with Rich at his house not too long after that. He would stop by the newspaper sometimes. I felt bad because after a while, into my stint there, I was drinking mostly on my off days, and I didn't really acknowledge a lot of people. But Rich would still stop by, and I think the last meeting we had was shortly before I left Kimball. And Rich was very interesting in that he was very nice and he was very controlled. Not controlling, but controlled. He smoked cigarettes, but he did it in a way that I'd never seen before. And I never knew anybody who could do it like this. He enjoyed taking just a few drags off a cigarette. So he would stop by the newspaper while I was smoking. He would pull out the same cigarette he had been smoking for maybe a month, take a few drags, and put it away. And then he'd turn to me and be like, that's all I need. It boggled my mind that he was satisfied with just that much. I think in many ways I've always tried to be satisfied with just that much in so many areas. But he figured it out. Yeah. But it was shortly after I left that I found out he died. Um, Unexpectedly, it was a brief illness. I think I read in the Observer, the Western Nebraska Observer, not my paper. And I think that was hard because he was one of the first people I met in my adult life who was just kind to me for no reason. I never did anything for him. Just from day one, he was kind to me and welcoming. And honestly, he made Kimball a much better place for me. And I'm really sad he's gone. Too soon. I think he was 63. But he died in, I think, 2014. Um, Shortly after that, there were two more. Uh, One of them I interviewed. One of them was kind of um, like Rich, but not really. So throughout my career, I've interviewed a lot of older people. Um, I find it fascinating to kind of go back and listen to the stories that different generations have, especially people that have lived a long time. So I got to interview a woman, Fern Stala, um, when she was, I want to say she was 102. And It was an experience that taught me a lot about patience and a lot about kind of the process of not only aging, but sorting some things out. So, Vernon lived a very long life. And what happens towards the end, because I've interviewed a few people over 100, is that they have good moments, they have bad moments, they have good days, and they have bad days. So sometimes an interview will even be moved a day because it's not one of their good days. On a good day, they remember a lot. However, that can fade over time. It's like the more they talk about it, the less they can hold on to it sometimes. So I caught Fern on what was maybe a day smack dab in the middle. So what happened is we talked for, I want to say, an hour and a half, 2 hours. And throughout that time, she told me all about her life and I got all the details. But the interesting thing, and her son was there, one of her sons was there because he wanted to help me because he knew something I didn't about how she held a conversation. And that was this, is that by that point in her life, Fern could slip in conversation between one decade into another as far as details she's talking about, or she was talking about, because she died after I left, I think, about a year or two. I think she lived to be 104. Um, but yeah, it was interesting because you wouldn't have known that she had changed decades unless somebody was there that knew her tendencies. So it informed kind of part of the process. The elderly have incredible stories to tell. They really do. I've talked to many of them, and some people will tell you stories that, especially as somebody of the millennial generation, growing up during a technological and digital boom, um, hearing some stories of what people had to do just to kind of get by is endlessly fascinating to me. Um, but you have to be aware that after a certain point, we become unreliable narrators of our own lives, I think. All the pieces are there, but we can't hold them together anymore. We need help. So that's why in those situations now, it's always, I ask if there's a family member or somebody who can be there, because if I don't, the story will come out and then I'll get a phone call like, yeah, that's all just weirdly mixed together or something like that. So some of these people informed professionally what I do. The third person was kind of just, so when I was at the Western Nebraska Observer, the shop that was right next door to us was Lauron's department store. And it was run by Ron and Lorna Evelyn. Ron Evelyn was an old man who walked around. He would scoot with a walker from his shop door next door into my door every Thursday, because that's when the paper would come out, because we were a weekly and it would be in the office. And he would always he would walk in the door and I'd see him coming because he moves slow. He'd come in, he'd pick up a copy, like single paper, and he would pull it up and he would stare at it. And then he'd notice that like I'd come out of my office and he would always ask the same question. So anything good in here this week? Always joking. He was very supportive and a very lovely man. Um, and then we'd talk for a little bit, about life, about how he was doing, how his wife was doing, things like that. And that was the custom basically every day, every week for the nearly 2.5 years that I was in Kimball. And yeah, he died shortly after I left too. But he was in his 80s and he had lived a long life, and honestly, he seemed happy. And so did his wife. They were such wonderful people. I don't know how to describe the quality of people that I came to know um, in times of need during my life, especially when I was younger. When I needed compassion, when I needed support, and these people were a few of them. They were, um, along with maybe the hardest one to talk about. Well, no, I'll get to another one before I talk about that one. Um, Other people I interviewed that became supporters, and actually, it was interesting because all the way in Kimball, I met someone who was also born in Racine. His name was Don Onagike. Um, his wife was Connie. Connie had a very gentle, high voice, like "Oh, thank you," like that kind of thing. Um, and I know that because I interviewed her because her and Don were blood donors, and Connie had hit some really, really high mark as far as donating, as far as how many units. And so I'd interviewed her and I talked to Don too, and I would see them out. And Don had been diagnosed with cancer. So he had to actually quit donating blood because of that, even though he hoped to, recover and start donating again with his wife. Me and him used to talk about our hometown, about Racine, about his experiences kind of there, and what was there when he was around, and if it was still around when I was there. Like the thing that I miss most in Racine, which is Old Dutch custard. I'm still mad that that's gone. I leave for 5 years, I come back and it's gone. Life is life is cruel. But no, he anytime I saw him, when you see somebody and they genuinely wish you well, or they genuinely care about your well-being, you can see it in their eyes. I always saw it in his eyes, and that always made me feel like I wasn't too far away from home. You know? There was that little piece of the Racine Kenosha area, even there in Kimball, that I could kind of tap into. He died, I want to say in 2017 or somewhere in there. This past week, actually, a longtime sports writer in Kimball died, Tom Southard. You should Google Tom Southard. So, Tom Southard had written sports for decades, up until his death, pretty much. And he was well known throughout the state for it. He was well known by the WNA, um, or the Nebraska Press Association, or what do they call it? Was it the whatever they are, the State Press Association, and had received many accolades for his commitment to sports, for his writing, and everything like that. And he deserved all of them. However, as an editor, there was one wrinkle with Tom Southard that I find interesting now, but was endlessly frustrating when I was a young editor. And that was this. Tom Souther did not like computers, hated them. So the only way he would write his articles was on a typewriter. That's right. He would type up all of his articles on a typewriter, and then he'd bring them in. And then the office manager would take them and scan them into the system through some software we had gotten just for that purpose. Most of the time it got it right. Sometimes it didn't, and he would get really mad because I wouldn't catch it. And rightfully so, because it would not change into flattering words. Um, but he was unique, but he was beloved in Kimball and throughout the state. He committed his life to telling the stories of athletes in Nebraska, and he did it well. And I think he's up for being in either the uh, Press Association Hall of Fame or he's been nominated, and I don't know where it is because of COVID. I think they delayed considerations or that process, but I hope he gets in there because he deserves it. Me and him butted heads, honestly, because I was young and stubborn and I wanted him to join the digital age, and he was older and knew what he was doing. And I probably should have just listened to him. So he died this past week, actually. So rest in peace, Tom. Um, I hope whatever kind of afterlife or even if there isn't one, you had a final thought, I hope it was a good one, filled with memories of award-winning and beautiful sports pieces or pieces telling the story of the community. I know they appreciated it, and I know I did too. Now's the hard one. So, when I was in Kimball, the economic development director at the time, when I first came, was Larissa Benad. Um, she was younger. Okay, younger because everybody else was old in Kimball, but she was about, I want to say 32, 33 when I showed up in Kimball. So she was about a decade older than me. But I used to have to talk to her a lot for a story about a potential rail spur in Kimball. But those interviews would go off record and we'd start developing a friendship. She'd stop in my office. I would stop over at hers. She was an official for a time. She was let go in a move by the city administrator that was just basically him flexing his power, I want to say, to be quite honest, which killed that Railspur project that I had mentioned, and it never came to fruition, which would have been pretty good for Kimball. That person then left about a year or two after that, or he left within the past couple of years, his post as city administrator. But Larissa was very passionate also about the environment and about the future. So she was the head of Keep Kimball Beautiful, which was kind of the recycling and green initiative in Kimball, which surprisingly people were cool with. You'd think it'd be weird um, in a more Republican and conservative town. And I don't mean that to offend any Republican or conservative listening. It's just, honestly, you don't think of Republican and green energy, not in the stereotypical way that people are forced to think about Republicans or Democrats or how we talk about people, which is also wrong. So I might have just kind of push a wrong thought on the air. So I'm sorry about that. But anyway, Larissa was passionate about beautifying Kimball. She loved Kimball, even though Kimball was never going to be good again, I don't think. The downtown buildings had fallen so much in disrepair that they were all infected with or covered in probably asbestos and things like that on the inside. And a small city like Kimball doesn't have the means or resources to address those issues. But Larissa kept fighting. Um, I told her often, you should get out of Kimball and go someplace where people will actually appreciate your efforts because people really didn't pay attention to Larissa as much as they should have. She was always outnumbered, but she was always trying to do the right thing. And for me, she was always a kind of a confidant. She made me feel like a person many times when other people didn't. Um, when I was leaving Kimball, she told me that she thought that wherever I went next, or that time would bring me the maturity that I needed to be truly effective, which might sound harsh, but it wasn't. It was a fair assessment. And she said it in the nicest way. But she died unexpectedly, I think, of a brain tumor or cancer. A couple of years back. And I read about it. And I don't react to deaths that much um, when it comes to coverage areas. I mean, you get used to obituaries and things like that. But that one hurt. But it's funny. Now I think I appreciate the time I got to spend with those people in Kimball more. Um, because when I look back, it was those people and a few others during my time in Kimball that really shaped who I am, how I approach people, and how I open myself to people. Because honestly, when I first came to Kimball, I thought they were all just backwards rural people. I mean, all that stereotypical stuff, but they weren't. They, in fact, many of them cared about me, and I want to say some of them loved me, and I cared about and loved them too. So much so, I still miss the people that I don't see and the people I'll never see again. The 23 I'll never see again. Larissa, too. And Don and Rich. And all of them. I think about them often. They're my friends. Today, I actually, maybe it's why I'm feeling more emotional about it. This morning, when I was kind of looking back over, well, going back over how many people have actually died since I left Kimball, I checked on somebody in Monticello, Indiana, that was older and whose wife had died a couple years back. And normally, um, with older couples, if the spouse dies, the other one's going to go soon. But what ended up happening is that turns out that person's still alive. But a friend that I had in Monticello died back in March, but I never found out. Um, His name was Keen McCohen. Keen was an older man who had retired from a business that he ran, making lots of money. And when he retired, he became basically a historian for White County, Indiana, and a professional fundraiser. I can't explain how this man did it, but this guy could raise tens of thousands to even hundreds of thousands of dollars from people. He could do it in a week if he wanted. I was amazed. Not only that, but he was so knowledgeable, and he was the funniest thing about Keen is that he never seemed old. He was, I want to say, in his 70s, but Keen, he he would walk in my office, and he was this skinny older man with like just a mustache, still full head of hair, but it was all gray. And he would come traipsing around the corner, and I knew when he walked in my office that I would like it would be fun because Keen always had fascinating little projects that he was working on. And I learned a lot from him too, because he would give me advice. Keen was one of those people that would call me when I made a mistake and offer encouragement, support, and advice for how to not do it again. Um, and he's the one that I shaped a lot of how I treat people as I'm building the Observer off of, quite honestly. Um, so something Keen taught me that that became part of what I do in approaching people is that he taught me that a lot of people will go to somebody with a handout. They'll always ask to take something from somebody first. And then you'd always say, that's not how you do it. You give somebody something, and then you ask them to give you something. That's how you do it. That was his secret. He would always first give before he asked people to give to something that he would do. That way, he built relationships, and he also showed people that he was too committed to them and to the community. But no, he died of lung and liver cancer. The a bit sad, but he was a good man. And the thing I appreciate most about him, actually, which ties into kind of what I'm doing now, is I have mentioned dealing with ignorance with people and things before. And one of the most ignorant things that there was in White County was there was always this rumor that White County was named White County because racism, because it was only white, you know. So much so that my general manager at one point, no, he was the ad director and news director, told me that his daughter was in class in Kimball or in Monticello, and had answered, you know, why is White County called White County? And she's like, well, because of racism. And the teacher was like, that's exactly right. Which, by the way, that teacher was wrong. White County, Indiana is named after Colonel Isaac White, which you can look up Colonel Isaac White. And I really don't want to get into the whole history of it, but it angered Keene so much that people were spreading misinformation about the origin of White County that he made it his mission to let everybody know about Colonel Isaac White, and he did. So much so, he fundraised to have a statue of Colonel Isaac White put on the main square in Monticello. And barring some natural disaster that destroyed it, it's still there to this day. Keen McCohen did that. Keen McCohen did a lot of things. And I hope that in the end, if somebody ever talks about me, that they sit there and they think about me and feel about me how I do about him right now. And I think that's a good place to end. Anyway, this has been another episode of Observances with Daniel Thompson, where I talk about a plethora of experiences over an 8-year journalism career. Sometimes it's sad. Sometimes it's funny. Sometimes it's just weird. But it's always real. And it's always honest. I hope you appreciate that honesty, and I hope that you keep coming back. If you'd like to follow my written work, you can do so by visiting facebook.com/the Uptown Observer. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your support. And please remember to tell the people you love that you love them and appreciate the time you get to spend with them. Because later on, those are the memories that sustain us after they're gone. Have a happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. What did Anthony Kennedy say? Productive Kwanzaa? All of them. All of them. Whatever it is you do, please do it safely, warmly, and comfortably. Have a good day.